All right, guys. Injuries from the game. Kevin Givens did have a torn pec. He'll end up going to IR. Christian McCaffrey was a PCL. Shouldn't need surgery, but still about a 6-week recovery, so he'll be going to IR also. And the surprise one from the game was J.P. Mason. Ended up having a high ankle sprain, so he's going to have to go to IR most likely also. And that's it from the game. Go ahead.
Kyle, do you have any updates on it? Go ahead, Eric.
Guys, what is the plan at running back? Obviously, you have Garendo, but will you have to be adding some people in that position?
Yeah, we have Garendo. Obviously, he'll be up. We got Patrick here, who's on our practice squad, who will definitely be bumped up now. Who was on our roster earlier in the year before Christian came back, and we'll most likely have to look for another.
Kyle, do you have any updates on the other guys who were injured before the game? Nick, Trent?
Yeah, I'll hit them all here. Banks is still in the protocol. Elliott's still in the protocol. Flanagan fouls with his knee. He'll be day-to-day this week. Demo with his knee. We're expecting to get back in practice on Wednesday. Nick, same thing. We'll have to evaluate. Him and Trent are kind of in the same boat. We're going to have to evaluate as the week goes. And then IR guys, Greenlaw will continue to practice, and Huff, we plan on opening up his practice window here on Wednesday.
As far as Talanoa goes, would he have to play with some sort of device or cast or support on his wrist?
Yeah, he's going to have something on it. He's tried a few things out. I'm not exactly sure what he's going to have, but he's going to have some things on it and see how that goes this week.
Also, news came out about Trent Williams and his wife losing their children at birth. Is he going to take some time off for that as well?
He did a little bit of that last week. Something that happened that last week, and he was there at the hospital with her, and got to meet him and say bye. And then he had to cremate him on Friday, so he's been dealing with that, and he's working through it. But we're also trying to be here for him through it all.
Kyle, what went into the decision to make Dobbs the backup Purdy last night?
Just the type of game that we thought it could be. We had a feeling all week just looking at the forecast, and we knew it would be more of a running game, and we wanted that element added to it. We thought he could help in that way.
Kyle, as far as football goes, it seems like it's just a common theme of self-inflicted mistakes that have been going on. I don't know how you address that or how you change that. I know it's different mistakes every week. How do you actually try to make those adjustments?
When it's different things, it's not really just an adjustment that you make. You got to keep coaching. You got to keep challenging guys. If a guy continues to do the same mistakes, you got to try to find a different guy to put in there. It's all of the above. So stuff we're continuing to work at. We obviously haven't gotten it done, but that's one area in particular. So we got to work on getting more turnovers. Obviously, we got to work on protecting the ball better, which came in 3 different ways. One on the goal line, one on a kick return, one on a slip ball throwing, which killed us there in the second half, similar to Green Bay. But it's not one thing in particular. So a lot of things go into it.
Kyle, how do you process the real life issues that you've had with Trent and Mooney as a coach and as someone as someone responsible for a team, and get through that stuff with them?
That's stuff that we do every day. It's not to the extreme. You got to deal with tragedies like this. It's it's hard as a coach. It's hard as a friend. It's hard as a family member. It's hard for everybody. But we spend a lot of time with each other, and that's what's cool about a football team. Whatever you go through, the good or the bad, we go through it together. And I do like for those guys, because I do like that they have this. They have a group of guys they can go to, a group of guys that can see them every day, and you can never escape that full grief and stuff. But I do think it's nice for those guys to have another avenue to get out on the football field, to get around teammates and things like that. I thought it was a huge step by Mooney this week, just from a personal level. No one really, when something like that happens, happens, you don't really want to jump back into anything. You got to kind of make yourself. And I was real proud of him fighting through this week. And even though it was hard, and I'm sure he didn't always want to do it, but he got through the week of practice, got through the game, and I think that was a real step for him just going forward with his life. And that's the thing everybody's got to do in those situations. But it's nice when you have a football team and stuff that you have a group of guys that you're around every day and that you're close with that can help you through it.
It's your understanding that Trent wants to get back out there when he's healthy?
Oh yeah, definitely. Trent's really trying to get back out here. We just got his ankle isn't healing the way we want. We can't get the swelling down and stuff. So that's why, I'd like to say it's day to day, week to week, because we're expecting the swelling to go down and everything. It just hasn't. So we're trying to be patient with it. I know he's being patient with it, and hopefully it'll take a turn in the right direction this week. But it hasn't yet. So there's no guarantees.
When you look at all the issues with the team and how heavy this feels, all the different issues and the injuries, how do you keep everybody focused and at a level where they can compete on the field on a Sunday?
You have to. That's the challenge. Lots of things go on in life, but everybody does have a job to do, and so you got to respect those challenges. You got to respect what people are going through, but you got to also help pull people together to do their job. And we're a team that counts on everybody, but I don't think it's much different in the business world either. People go through a lot of stuff, and but whatever their line of work is, they just have a responsibility to do. So we all understand that fully and how hard it can be on someone. And I do think in a sports atmosphere and a team atmosphere, kind of like what I was saying earlier, it's nice for those guys to to have a team and stuff they can be around and not feel as alone. But that's not gonna. No one's going to judge your team off of that. They're going to judge it off of wins and losses, and those games come once a week. And you got to put your plan together. You got to practice as hard as you can, and you got to get 48 guys out there on the field in uniform that are going to help you win. And like with injuries, you can't always count on everybody, whether it's an injury or whether it's something tragic that happened. People are going to go through some stuff, and when that happens, we got to have another guy step it up.
With how the defense has played, have you been pleased and satisfied with the way Nick Sorensen's been calling games?
Yeah, I'm very satisfied with Nick. I'm not at all satisfied with the results and how it's going right now, but some of the mistakes that we've made, I don't think, or what's happened here in these last 2 weeks, I don't think that's a schematic issue. It's a little bit more of a fundamental issue, and that also starts with me. That goes to all coaching, and it goes down to the players. It goes to everyone in this building. So, but the results here these last 2 weeks haven't changed my opinion on Nick.
Sorry, airport. It was already a pretty trying season for Christian before this. We talked about the frustration. Have you had a chance to talk to him and just see where he is after the latest injury?
No, I haven't got a chance to talk to him. Just getting back, 5:30 in the morning last night, and just getting all this stuff finished up here a little bit ago. And I know he's been getting his MRIs and everything, so I'll connect with him here this afternoon. But I know it's I just feel for him. It was a real frustrating year for him. He worked his ass off to get back to this point, and I think he was really feeling good and about to take off, and just had that real unfortunate injury last night. So I know he's as crushed as anyone, but he'll get through this. He's a hell of a player, hell of a person, and an unbelievable 49er, and he'll be back stronger than ever next year to help us.
Will Brock Purdy be limited in practice this week, or is he full go?
No, Brock's full go. He didn't even come in for rehab today, so Brock's fine.
We'll take a couple more now.
How did you feel Ben Barch played his first start with 49ers?
I was impressed by him. I know he's got some ability. He's got a lot of ability and stuff, and we've enjoyed working with him here. But that was our first time going into a game with him, and I loved how he competed. I thought he blocked well. I thought he helped us in that game, so it was a good first start for him.
Kyle, you said last night this team isn't as good as I guess some of the others, which I guess by the record would be like, yeah. Did you mean from a talent perspective? Do you mean when you consider all the injuries and who is out there right now? Or just provide a little more context for what you meant?
I'm just answering a question that, when I constantly get asked about, I think I get asked, does this team not have the same fight as last year's team? And, everything goes to the team the year before. And I was just trying to imply this isn't last year's team. And so you wanted a reason for why our record isn't as good as last year's. And when it's asked about fighting and stuff, that's, I don't see it all that way. I was making the point that this isn't last year's team. Last year's team was obviously a better team. I'm not saying just from the roster. I'm just saying from the beginning to end, the way we started out, the way we felt in training camp, throughout the whole year. We've been trying to build that with this team. We've had times where we felt that we were on the right path to it. And then we've had some setbacks that I think it's always been one step forward, two steps back, and we really haven't grasped the full potential of this year's team, and that's why I don't like comparing it to last year's team or the year before.
Joining us on the UMA guest line, David, it's Greg Papa, Greg Silver here in San Francisco, where you are headed back toward, and we really appreciate your time here on this busy travel day.
Yeah, thankfully it got sunny out here. Just a little delay, but nothing too bad. That was crazy, though, yesterday. That was, from a visual perspective, it was like the game in Green Bay a few years ago, but the whole game was covered in snow, and you got to see the whole they love it in Buffalo. Those fans were having fun. They were throwing snowballs the whole game. It was crazy. It was a lot of fun to watch. I don't think it was as much fun for the 49ers to evaluate their performance, though.
Yeah, well, often in Buffalo, and I grew up here, as you know, David, they would have a snowstorm before Halloween. That would tell you what kind of winter. This was the first flake of snow they've had all year. This is the latest ever in the history of Buffalo, New York, Western New York, and all the surrounding counties of Erie County, where they received a snowstorm as late in November. And it arrived on the last day of November, a little bit on Friday, but mainly November the 30th into December the 1st. And it, unlike the game at Lambeau when it started to snow in the second half, it snowed the whole game. It was snowing pregame. It let up a little bit, and then it wasn't a squall or a blizzard, but it was persistent flurries throughout the game. So let's just start there. We're trying to evaluate the Niners at Lambeau, and those conditions weren't as gnarly as last night. How do you evaluate it? How do you look at it? They did run the ball effectively, but they got run all over in both venues. They're turning the ball over way too much. Is it simply, as you called it, going to the North Pole of the NFL? How do you evaluate what happened last night and the week before?
I think they're just a terrible team defensively without Nick Bosa and without Fred Warner playing at 100%. And that's alarming that they're so dependent on those two players on the defensive side of the ball. But, they got run out of the building, as you said, especially in the first half against Green Bay, and we thought that was bad. And they gave up the 125 yards rushing. Well, this was even worse statistically. They gave up 142 yesterday. And, talking to some of the guys in the locker room, they said, yeah, it's all stuff that we saw on tape. But for whatever reason, they weren't ready for the stuff that they saw on tape. And, they talked about moving slowly through the snow. It was clumping up on their cleats. But Buffalo looked to be moving with no problem at all. So I guess maybe a little bit of a home field advantage there. But it's not – it can't explain what's happened to the 49ers the past 2 weeks. And really this goes back to the second half of the game against Seattle. As soon as Nick Bosa exited that game, the defense fell apart. They didn't give up a single touchdown, and they were 3.3 yards per play the Seahawks were with Bosa in the game. They scored both of their touchdowns and were over 6 yards of play when Bosa was out. And that carried over into Green Bay where they got dominated. That carried over into Buffalo where they got dominated. The struggles begin there. If you cannot stop the run on defense, it doesn't matter what the rest of the team does, because the opposition is just going to be able to run at will, control the game, and then you're just waiting for a disastrous turnover, especially in the snow when you're having to come from behind offensively. So I think it starts with the 49ers defensive struggles. They've been one of the worst units in the league ever since Nick Bosa went down.
Talking to David Lombardi here, and David, we mentioned your name about 10:30 today to kick off the show, and for a reason that I would never, ever want to have to confront. And that was the tragic news that you reported about Trent Williams and losing his two twins, which happened on November 24th, one during pregnancy and then one shortly after birth. Just want to ask if you got to see Trent Williams around much this week, and then kind of in the same vein, if you've had many interactions with Charvarius Ward, as he has dealt with something really similar, losing Amani Joy, his baby girl, and just kind of how they're trying to stay professional and process this, but clearly not being themselves.
Well, first of all, these types of events are a reminder, and I wish we didn't get this reminder. It's obviously a tragic one, but it's a reminder that it's about more than football. And the guys that we're talking about, they're professional athletes, but they're human beings too. And this 49ers team just happens to have dealt with more tragedy than I've ever seen condensed into a single season for a football team. So obviously, thoughts and prayers out to the families of both Charvarius Ward and Trent Williams, given what's transpired there. Charvarius Ward obviously has been back with the team. He hadn't spoken to the media yet. I was able to offer my condolences to him in the locker room last week. Needless to say, I mean, it's still something that seems to be weighing on him in terms of sadness, and I can't even imagine going through what he had to go through. And now with Trent Williams, it's an equally tragic situation. So I have not seen Trent since last week, and that the news had not yet hit social media then. At that point last week, I did see Nick Bosa in the locker room giving Trent Williams a hug last week. I don't know if it was related to this news, but one can only imagine how this is affecting these players and how it's affecting the 49ers team, because it is a tragedy that's hard to really even put into words.
Yeah, it's obviously bigger than football. And it's something you never forget. How do you ever get over the loss of your babies like this? And for Trent, it's twins, and Charvarius, his baby girl that really changed his life. They'll take that to the day you die and maybe beyond, that kind of pain. So we know what's going on here. They're 5-7. The math isn't good. Seattle won in Jersey yesterday. Arizona did lose, but the Rams won. It is what it is now. I mean, my question is, in light of what we're talking about the loss of life, not the loss of football games. Does this team have the fight in them? I know when they get out on the field, we're not seeing a lack of effort, and they didn't miss as many tackles yesterday. They just couldn't get guys on the ground. Maybe it was the weather, but do they, as a collection, with those two men that have lost their babies, Nick Bosa coming back from the oblique injury, Fred Warner playing with literally a broken ankle, Demo going through what he's going through. I mean, it's going up and down the whole roster. Do they have the fight in them? They're not mathematically done by any stretch, and there's some projections that we have that it could be a four-way tie at 9-8, and they can still win the NFC West. But do they have it in them psychologically, physically, emotionally, spiritually to make the kind of run? Because we're looking at, they got to go 4-1 at the minimum over the last 5 games to get in.
Well, it's almost impossible to gauge a team's psychological, emotional, spiritual readiness. So I'll just keep this to the physical side of it. Are they good enough? Are they well equipped enough from a health standpoint right now to do what they need to do? And that may be go 5-0 over the final 5 games. I don't think so. I mean, just looking at this right now, again, the defense is playing bottom barrel football. Nick Sorensen hasn't been able to scheme his way out of the losses of Nick Bosa, and I'll say the loss of Fred Warner too. I mean, Warner's still out there, but he's playing on a broken ankle. And he clearly has not been his defensive player of the year self since breaking that ankle, spraining and fracturing it back in week 4 against the Patriots. So what you're looking at is an extremely top-heavy defense that was glued together by a couple superstars, neither of whom is available, at least in 100% form right now. So I think, over half the formula, or at least half the formula for the 49ers to rip off several consecutive wins over the back half of this season would be to play at least above average defense, and they're not doing anything close to that right now. So unless Nick Bosa can come back and be a 90 to 100% next week and somehow be able to flip a switch on this defense, which I guess you can't firmly rule out, but unless that happens, then there's no chance of them doing what they need to do. Then, on the offensive side of the ball, I think it's really foolish to look at a snow game and just, make big assertions about Brock Purdy, who's a timing quarterback, who's a finesse quarterback when it comes to the anticipatory throws that he makes. That obviously wasn't going to be on the table for the 49ers yesterday. What they did get yesterday, and this is the one piece of good news that they needed, and they could have really used it against Seattle, against Green Bay, they got really good run blocking performance. And up until the point that Christian McCaffrey got hurt, they were dominating the Buffalo defense in the run. And that's a solid Buffalo defense. I think that Ben Barch had an amazing performance for his first start there at the left guard spot. He was opening up some holes for McCaffrey. The other interior lineman, Dominic Puni, had a really good bounce back game for the 49ers. So that part of the formula was there. But they were unable to leverage it into more in the passing game. A lot of that probably had to do with the snow conditions. If you look forward, can this offense build off of that? Sure. But even if the offense does, if the defense is playing at this type of level, they don't have a shot to do what you're talking about. So it would take a major reversal on that side of the ball.
Yeah, David, I saw you tweet about not just the offensive red zone inefficiencies, but also the defensive red zone inefficiencies that the 49ers have experienced. And it's unfortunately rather interesting stuff. But I do want to leave you with talking about Brock Purdy, who you just mentioned. And I'm with you that one game in the snow, coming off of a shoulder injury, wasn't going to form some drastic opinion for me. But the reality is the numbers have been down for him this year. He has turned the ball over a little bit more than Kyle Shanahan would be comfortable with. And I want to ask, do you see him in a situation here in these final 5 games where he's playing for big contract money, or do you think that there's just been so much that's gone wrong this year that he's likely going to get a big contract no matter what happens, barring some kind of extreme injury?
Well, you're always auditioning for either a job or a contract in the NFL. That's a never-ending cycle that for any player, right? So what you put on tape at any point of the year in any situation is either going to be used for you or against you in any contractual talk. So, I think that's a constant at all times. But what Purdy has put on tape so far in his career, even this season, I think has been eminently impressive. Kyle Shanahan even said a couple of weeks ago he thinks that Brock has been playing at the same level, but the situation around him has just changed. And look at the stylistic numbers of the 49ers offense. They've gone from number 1 in the NFL to number 32, like first to dead last in yards after the catch. They've gone from like number 10 or 11 in average separation at the time of the catch to dead last this season. The run blocking obviously hasn't been the same. Christian McCaffrey, finally started seeing the holes that he was seeing before in this game yesterday, and then he got hurt. So the entire dynamics of the offense around Brock Purdy have been much, much less healthy than they were before. I could tell you that entering this Buffalo game, if you looked at some of the advanced metrics, they do their best to kind of isolate quarterback performance from everything else. Purdy was number 2 behind Joe Burrow in a lot of these adjusted metrics. So, and Burrow, he too is on a losing team this year. So it just goes to show you that what happens outside a quarterback is really important too. It's not going to be the QB doing everything. And I think that even Buffalo, who's got Superman at quarterback, especially in the snow with Josh Allen, that was a team firing on all cylinders around him. The 49ers definitely are not firing on all cylinders around Brock Purdy this year. So long story short, he's always auditioning. And that contract is going to be the big point in the 49ers news cycle here over the next few months. But I don't think his play has been bad at all. And yesterday, looking at a poor game statistically, I wouldn't look at a snow game as any indicator of that, especially.
And then over to the defensive side, and you just said both Celeste Niners are just not a very good defense. I mean, when you look at it, they gave up 5 touchdowns yesterday. They gave up 5 touchdowns in Green Bay. They've been run on in both situations. These backs, Josh Jacobs and James Cook, both had 100-plus yards rushing. How many touchdowns have they given up on the ground this year? 16? Wow. And then, the 3 series that Nick got hurt And ironically, when he sacked Geno Smith, it all came tumbling down on the very next play, the 3rd and 12, when they converted over the top of Yadam to DK. They scored 2 touchdowns the last 3 series of that game. So you're giving up 5 touchdowns a week, 2 out of 3 in the game he left early. They need Bosa back, David. Is he going to come back? What are you hearing? And the oblique injury is weird. He had it on the right side and then sacking Geno. He hurt it on the left side. I mean, the bilateral Achilles tendonitis, we learned that. What is it, bilateral oblique injury? The core, it's odd. They need him back. Is he going to come back for Chicago? And then if he comes back for the Bears, can he play against the Rams? Does he have to wait because, you got 2 games in the next 10 days? Are they going to get Bosa back here at some point?
So what happened is that he was playing hurt, and that game against Tampa Bay was a great example of Bosa playing hurt. So he was trying to fight through this, just like Fred Warner has been trying to fight through the ankle injury. Obviously, he was compromised. He still got to Baker Mayfield in that game for a really big sack, but then he wasn't able to bring down Baker. I asked Nick about it in the locker room right after, and he said he was kind of worried about a horse collar penalty. But I also do think that the whole act of having to lunge and drag a physically strong quarterback, Baker's got a really strong base, down is something that probably was compromised by that injury. Anyway, he was trying to play through it. Then he had 2 sacks against Seattle, and on the second sack, he was trying to compensate for the side that was injured, so he injured the other side, which obviously made things even worse. So I don't even think that the first side was fully healed at the time that he injured the second side, which extended the timeline. It has been a week-by-week thing, so I do think that he is planning to come back this season. They're obviously mathematically still alive. There's obviously still that faint chance, and I think just for culture purposes in the locker room, you always fight till the end. I mean, there's all these people that want to mail it in and do this and do that. It's a really tricky balance the 49ers have to run. If Christian McCaffrey is hurt with a PCL, of course you don't play him until he's healthy. But once guys are healthy, and I think Ed McCaffrey came out and said this today, Christian's going to play. Once Nick Bosa's healthy enough to play, he's going to play. Like Fred Warner feels he's healthy enough to play, he's going to play. So we'll see when that happens. I think it's going to happen at some point this season. I just don't know exactly when, because they've got to manage this, and they got to figure out when he's going to be effective enough to play, given the fact that it is tricky with both sides being hurt.
David, thank you so much for your time. Safe travels. Really appreciate you breaking up your airport experience to spend some time on KMBR, and we'll do this again soon.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Have a good one.